Hello, it's the Dove Lady again. And today I'm going to read to you some of the words Walter Russell spoke about sex practices. Now, you might think he would be condemning having sex outside of marriage or homosexuality or anything like that, but he's not. His reasons for wrong sex practices, well, you'll just have to hear it. It's all about choosing the wrong mate. And so I will begin. So many questions concerning sex principles have been asked that this lecture is given to answer them. Lack of higher sex knowledge is causing a rapid degeneration of the whole of our civilization. The standard of world culture is lowering. We are producing very few geniuses as compared with last century. The mentally diseased and physically unfit are also on the increase. The percentage of rejections by the Army for physical and mental unfitness was greater in the past war than ever before. Lack of knowledge of sex mating is one of the greatest causes for degeneracy of world races. Civilizations have fallen from high places many times in history for lack of sex knowledge and from wrong sex practices. It is possible that this present civilization will fall for the same reason. It is well to examine our sex-human relations in this respect. By higher sex knowledge, I mean the effect of wrong sex practice and wrong mate choosing from a spiritual, mental, and character building viewpoint, instead of just from the physical and biological point of view. Throughout God's creating universe, one fact of nature is conspicuously characteristic of progress. That fact is that nature demands purity of species in order to produce high types of that species. Purity of species is possible only through balanced mate choosing. To most people, sex is just a relief of the body from sex hunger, just as food is a relief of the body from food hunger. Different kinds of food produce different effects upon the body, structure, and pattern. Likewise, different kinds of sex have different effects upon the body, structure, and pattern. More than that, sex has different effects upon the intellectual and moral thinking processes as well. It has been said that a man is what he thinks, also that a man is what he eats. To this should be added, a man is what his sex practice and sex ideals make of him. Sex practice and ideals of sex determine the standards of body and mind. One will invariably ascend or descend, physically, mentally, and spiritually, through one's sex practice. Sex practice can be the most spiritually uplifting or the most mentally and physically defiling thing in one's life, according to one's ideas concerning sex thinking or lack of them. The greatest injury from promiscuous sex relation lies in the fact that each person has his own wavelength or number and his own wave pattern, which he has created from his own thinking. Promiscuous sex relations affect both by undermining both. Each is benefited if the wave patterns are harmonious, are injured if the electrical wave patterns are too greatly opposed. Few realize that every cell in the body, plus the nature of the bloodstream, is permanently affected for better or worse by sex relations. The sex relation unifies two close mates, but that badly distorts electrically unbalanced ones. Years of hard climbing toward one's spiritual goal can be nullified in one brief costly hour of thoughtlessness in violating this most holy relationship between the sexes. Just as wrong sex practice can defile a life, so likewise can it defile a whole civilization. The ever-thoughtless average human thinks that sexual promiscuity leaves no damaging effects unless one of the participants is diseased. Mr. Average Man would be shocked to learn that the very self-pattern of his racial ideal, his emotions, his bloodstream, his individual ideal, and his very character is degenerated by choosing the wrong mate and by ever promiscuous sexual experience. Electrical connections between any two unequally sexually unbalanced bloodstreams means also an electrically unbalanced nervous system and body cells. Nerve sensations centering in the brain affect the dynamism of a person. They also affect all decisions, both spiritual and physical. Consider, therefore, the spiritual and physical damage caused to the body and to the soul pattern by unbalanced nerve oscillations reaching the brain from the body. Every separate cell of the body has a direct connection with the brain. If all of the body cells oscillate in unequal pulsations, imagine the terrific damage unknowingly done to the nervous system by so huge a multiplication of unbalanced messages reaching the brain from so many unequally balanced body cells. Blindness, deafness, arthritis, and many other ills arise from such electrical unbalance, and the body ages very rapidly. The urge of body cells upon the brain is sometimes so much greater than the control of the brain upon the cells that a man's willpower is often controlled entirely by this urge of the body cells. Instant, a man whose brain tells him that he must not and does not wish to kill, but he kills because of an uncontrollable urge. He cannot help it. He is but an automaton, obeying distorted messages sent to his brain by body cells which become frightfully distorted in pattern. It is therefore of vital importance in the building of the pattern of the individual that the cell urge is under the control of the conscious spirit in man, rather than in the cells of the body. This can only be possible if the electrical interchange between sex mates is so equal that one can forget his body entirely, as all geniuses do. Freedom from body is necessary for those who do creative work. Any inequality or unlikeness whatsoever leaves a residue of electrical unbalance, which evidences itself in many intensities, from slightly neurotic conditions arising from the unbalance due to repressions, pessimism, fanaticism, and insanity, to committing violent murder. These residual unbalances accumulate in time and force their victims to seek balance at any cost. The insane asylums have all too many of these sex-dissatisfied and abnormal mismatings. One of nature's characteristics is the development of pattern forms, which we call species, types, races, or breeds. Nature's manner of repeating these unfolding species of things is the splitting of their patterns into two electrically balanced, equal, harmonious, opposite halves, and then mating those equal halves in order to electrically reproduce other equal pairs of halves by nature's automatic processes in her use of electric waves. We call this division in nature into pairs of mates a sex division. We call the unions of the sexes matings. Nature creates her pure species of separate kinds of things by controlling the division into pairs of equal halves of the same electrically recorded patterns, and the matings of similarly balanced equal halves. Through her connecting lines of magnetic flux, nature telegraphs to all unfolding creatures her inviolate laws. They are recorded in them as instinct or otherwise sensed. and every living creature, except those of whom free will has been given, instinctively obeys that holiest of all nature's laws, the law of equal mating of harmoniously patterned halves. Nature's control over the lower orders of creative expression, such as in the chemical elements, is plainly indicated in their crystallization. Every truly balanced matings of equal halves crystallize as a true cube, while the slightest deviation in balance departs from the cube. Sex is not yet recognized as characteristic of the elements. It is supposedly limited to the organic or living things of creation. Sex is the fundamental principle of creation. Everything comes into the appearance of existence by the union of two opposite halves of a unit pattern, and everything repeats itself by the division of a unit into its positive and negative expressions. This is as true of the elements of matter as it is of animal and vegetable life. The sex matings of the elements exactly coincide in effect with the sex matings of humans. Violent explosions in the elements have the same basic cause as such violent explosions as murder in human. Terrific electrical unbalance is the cause of both. Likewise, stability in the elements and in humans has the same cause in equality of balance. Sodium and chloride are good examples of positive and negative opposites of a pair, which are equally but oppositely balanced with each other, and each equally unbalanced with its fulcrum equator. If these two chemical elements marry, they become such perfectly balanced and stable mates that the chemist calls them affinities. Sex perfection and imperfection. The chemists call the one thing which results from this marriage sodium chloride. You call it table salt. If you examine a crystal of table salt under a magnifying glass, you will find its pattern to be a true cube. The cube is the ultimate, the perfect balance of crystal pattern. If all the humans of one nation should mate together as carefully as sodium and chloride, that nation would produce a race so vastly superior to all other mismated nations that the difference might well be as great as between Shakespeare and a ditch digger. Now, let us consider a chemical mismating. Sodium could choose bromine or iodine or fluoride for a wife. Each of them would be good mates because all are in the same chemical group, but each in different octaves, like similar notes on a piano, and therefore would have a slightly unsatisfactory sexual interchange. When these slightly unequal balanced mates marry and have sex relations, both sex conditions are not completely voided. The stronger one is quite satisfied, but the other is not. Some unbalance still remains with the weaker one, and because of this mismating, the crystal record is not a true one. Its pattern is distorted by just the amount of potential which still remains unsatisfied. If one examines sodium iodine and sodium bromide crystals, one sees the gradually increasing irregularity of cubic distortions as the inequality increases. Exactly the same thing occurs with humans and all other species. Like mates of equal opposite charges reproduce true to the pattern of both. Unlike and unequally charged mates reproduce in distorted patterns. Unlike opposites cannot be balanced sex mates, even if these mates have a strong sexual urge for each other. The effect of any unlike qualities in either one would be degenerative to both, just as overindulgence in drinking in either mate would degenerate both, mentally and physically. Neither one can preserve his or her own pattern undefiled if one half of the current of their mutual sex interchange is defiled. Physical attraction alone is not a sufficient guide to choosing true mates, for upon examination of that attraction, the urge may be lustful and sensuous rather than uplifting and inspiring. Such mismatings in matrimonial life have as much of a destroying effect upon the individual's pattern as promiscuity has upon it. Like attracts like. All species and races are created in types, in appearance and personality, just as chemical elements are created in octave wave groups. Everyone recognizes to some extent the type that each is drawn to, and they intuitively feel each other's polarity mentally and physically. Such types naturally gravitate to and recognize each other, so that out of any 100 people, 99 might have no mental or sex appeal for each other, while the 100th would. All humans should seek the type which corresponds to their own electrical wavelength. When types so find each other, they will be as perfectly balanced as sodium and chloride, and the union should be enduring. It is a common saying that people should marry their opposites. Nothing could be more contrary to universal law than this statement. Everywhere in nature, like attracts like. This is fundamental. Opposites repel each other. Opposites in temperament and physical patterns invite discord, infidelity, and mutual degradation. Matrimonial mismatings unbalances the bloodstream, just as certainly as promiscuous mismatings unbalance it. Electrically sexed humans. We are all electric creatures floating in the electric sea of this electric universe. Every electric thing in the entire universe breathes electrically into itself from the rest of the electric universe, which is outside of itself. It also breathes out of itself into the rest of the universe. In more simple words, we might say everything in the universe is trying to become every other thing, and every condition of everything is trying to become every other condition. A hot iron, for example, will strive to become as cool as its environment, and the cool environment will strive to become as hot as a hot iron. They compromise and find an equilibrium between the two, which is neither the one thing nor the other. This conspicuous fact is one of the most characteristic traits of nature. It is the least understood, though it is manifested in thousands of chemical amalgamations. It might be summed up as follows. Every pair of opposites is divided by an equilibrium, which is a balance between the two, but that balance is not either of the two. Sodium chloride is an equilibrium which voids both sodium and chloride, for neither are present in it. Likewise, water is the equator which voids hydrogen and oxygen. All opposites of all kinds extend from a mutual equator, which is their common unity, and to that equator they must eventually return in order to repeat. Every pair must become one in order to again become two. Men and women do not escape this two-way reciprocative law. Each becomes what the other is. Both are always compromising each other's unbalance. If the two unbalances are equal and opposite, each type will survive and grow mentally, spiritually, and physically. If the two unbalanced mates are unequal in their opposition, the penalty is degradation, mentally, spiritually, and physically. The quality of one mate is a compromise with the quality of the other. The pattern resulting from this spiritual, mental, and moral development is compromised for good or bad by every contact between them, no matter how slight. This is true even outside the sex union. Nature speaks. Every creation of nature carries within itself the seeds of its own destruction, as well as its construction. Nature continues all of her creations or destroys them, in accordance with their obedience or disobedience to her principles. In the lower orders of creation, nature ensures by holding their control in her wise hands. She protects all of them, both organic and inorganic, from extermination by a series of electrical connections from each unit of herself to herself. No part of nature can ever become separated from nature. She never lets go of even the most minute electron. All nature is one spiritual entity, manifesting through one physical unit. There are not two separate or separated spiritual and physical units in all of the universe. All nature is electrically bound together by an intercommunicating and controlling electric flux. Every form and pattern is extended from every other form and pattern. The source of any one is the source of all. The patterns of all inorganic things are directed entirely by nature's commands. Their actions and their reactions are wholly under the control of the universal intelligence which manifests through nature. They have no free will of their own. Organic creations are gradually given a modicum of free will. We call these organic creations living things because we think that those mechanisms through which nature manifests life are in themselves alive and are self-thinking. These organisms, which we call bodies, do not live, nor do they think, not even the man mechanism. Their awareness of existence is electrical, not mental. The body of man is not the man. It is merely a focus through which nature manifests intelligence. It is merely a form of man's thinking. Man's body is like a water pipe through which water flows, or a wire which conducts electricity. The pipe is not the water, nor is the wire the power, nor is the body of man, man. Man is as invisible as nature itself. He is a mentality, not a quantity. But his body is a quantity, which can gradually learn to express some of that mentality in mechanisms to become aware of their unity with nature. As their sensing increases to a consciousness of the universal intelligence within them, they become more creative and less imitative. Through the electrical connections between so-called living things and nature, the commands of the universal intelligence are transmitted by way of instincts, automatic reflexes, sense systems, and similar communicating systems. It is by means of these that nature offers her unthinking, organic, automatic mechanisms to eat, sleep, fight enemies, or escape from them, to build nests, breed, feed their young, and migrate. As her creations learn to become better foci for her thoughts and think with God, they are released from instinctive dominion a little bit at a time. Universal intelligence then appears to operate with them as focal points. Humans have to learn by observation and experience, or by the teachings of others, what the animal world knows without teaching. Man has to learn how to build bridges and other such techniques and skills, while the beaver builds marvelous dams without having any instruction. Likewise, the spider spins his wonderful web, the ant and the bee build their corridored houses, and countless other forms are constructed by instinctively controlled animals, which man could not produce in principle without being taught to do by experience or by man. even in breeding and the feeding of young, instinctively controlled animals know what to do without being taught, while humans must be taught these things or perish. Tens of thousands of generations of salmon, or seals, or fishes of the sea, or animals of the land, or birds of the air will instinctively breed true to their species and keep them pure, while man, whose instinctive protection has been lessened, will wreck his types and species through ignorance, lust, and other causes, yes, even to mating purely for economic or social reasons, without regard to balance in mate choosing. All bodies of all creatures are mechanisms, created for purposes of manifesting God through action. Each bodily mechanism must be created true to purpose. Okay, I'm going to have to read this in two different sections because I'm already at 26 minutes. So I will stop here, but there's much more to this, and it's really, really interesting. And I hope you enjoy this. This is the Dove Lady, over for now.